Good morning, Mom Nation. It is Katie, your founder. I am here again with Diana. This is our monthly couples talk. We talk couples here, Diana, don't we?
We do talk a lot of couples.
We talk a lot about couples. And what do we all have in common, or what do many of us have in common in this group? We're couples or part of couples. So super, super relevant here. While you're at it, before we get started and we dive in, guys, while you are at it, please hop over to one of our social media platforms. We like IG, we like FB, and we like YT. I know you know what those are. We are at MOMnation USA. That's our handle. Please throw us a like and a subscribe so that you know when these videos are dropped, because it's good stuff, Diana, right?
Really good stuff.
Yes. So today, we're talking about something that I think affects a lot of people because we're people and we're forming relationships out there. And with relationships, we're bringing together other people from our lives, like our family members, extended family members, that kind of thing, into the relationship. I mean, when you marry someone or get into a relationship with someone, romantically, you kind of marry their whole family. Is that what we're talking about here?
Yes, there is typically more than just one person that you are getting into a long-term relationship with, right? Especially the more your family grows, they tend to become a bit more involved.
So, and obviously I have some experience with this. I've lived a lot of life. I've come together with a couple of families. Y'all know that I was married before Matt. Matt's actually my second husband. And so I've got lots of experience with this. But I mean, this could be, your spouse and your spouse's family, but also this could extend to, hey, my parents got divorced when I was 2, true story. And they have significant others that have kind of been brought into, my experience. And then there's a whole song and dance with that too. So which one do you want to dive into?
Wherever you want to start. You want to start with, just in-laws in general and kind of what boundaries can be set in a very healthy, calm, clear way.
Like, what do you see? What do you see with most of your patients that come in and maybe have this as an issue with their spouse or an issue with their spouse's family? Like, what are the common scenarios?
So it sounds super cliche, right? But I do hear a lot about how the mother-in-law tends to over-involve or meddle or cause conflict within the relationship. And it's not always the mother-in-law, but I do hear about it a lot. I feel like it's very cliche, but I think it says something larger systemically about our society and our role as mothers and how that transition kind of transpires over time as our kids become adults and become involved in their own relationships. So what I hear a lot about is mother-in-laws or even father-in-laws, other extended family becoming involved in the relationship's conflicts. So this is where you hear the adage, the blood is thicker than water, right? So sometimes family members feel the need to pick sides. And when they do that, that can cause even more strife for the couple that's having conflict because they can't be objective, right? Like nobody in your family can be objective about whatever conflict you're having.
Well, what are you doing sharing your intimate details with your family members anyway? I mean, doesn't that cause problems in the relationship?
Definitely. So I feel like there's a fine line between having a social support system, right? So you have your family, that's your support system. You have your friends. They're all great supports. They're there for you, through your ups and downs, all that good stuff. However, there are certain intimate details about your relationship, your romantic relationships that should probably stay out of the conversation, largely in part due to that objectivity that I was just referring to, right? Like if you take friends, for example, like we kind of spill it with all of our friends all the time, right? Like, oh, my husband did this or my wife did this and, whatever. Keeping it surface level, fine. That's perfectly healthy. That's great. You have someone to kind of create that shared meaning with. That's great. But typically friends tend to take the side of their friend, right? So because they don't have that objectivity, it's not like an outside perspective. It's only like half outside because you want to be supportive. You want to support your friend and that's all fine and good. But then when the conflict resolves itself within the relationship, now there's a little bit of awkwardness because now your friend really thinks of your significant other through that conflict. So it can put a little bit of strain on not only the friendship, but it undermines the relationship too. So when you transition that same kind of lack of objectivity to family members, they have even less objectivity because they care so much about their family member. They don't want to see them hurt. They don't want to see them within conflict. And so they tend to pick sides. And that can really undermine and make things a lot worse for the couple in terms of resolving that conflict. Because there's always going to be that overhanging cloud of something that has once happened. So keeping those details and conflicts out of the family conversations, out of the family dinners is highly recommended.
But what do you do? So let's just say, for instance, you have a really tight relationship with your mom and you share everything with your mom. You've always done this. And she's kind of like your, I don't know, venting person and, whatever you like, you have that relationship. So then when you come into, you get married or you come into a serious relationship as an adult, like, how do you wean yourself off from that? Or should you? Like, what would your suggestion be in that scenario?
Yeah, so that's a perfect example of how to set some boundaries. And it doesn't feel easy, especially when that's been part of your system. That's just been how things have always been. So changing the rules, so to speak, to any relationship is difficult. It's hard. There's often pushback, and then that makes it even harder because then you second guess your decisions, second guess setting your boundaries, and that can cause a lot of anxiety and depression too. So kind of referring back to what I was saying a minute ago as being a mom and that adjustment of your kids growing up and going into relationships, getting married, having kids, like all of those things, like that mom instinct never really goes away. But there's a lot of growth that's required, a lot of letting go that's required, because our goal as a mom, right, and as parents is to put our kids out into the world as healthy adults that can set their own boundaries and have healthy relationships and overall just be really happy and healthy in all aspects of their life, right, and being successful. So setting those boundaries does feel really difficult, but it's necessary. It doesn't have to be mean, but like, hey, mom, like, I really value our relationship. I love that I can tell you anything, but I feel that there's just some things that are off limits because, my husband and I, my wife and I, we're just, as we experience things, as our life goes on, we experience conflict. There's going to be times where it's going to be tough, but I would just prefer to keep those out of the conversation. So I really appreciate you respecting that. As long as you are very, clear, considerate about those boundaries that you're setting, most of the time it's really well received, right? The thing about boundaries, the biggest thing I tell every single client about setting boundaries is it's difficult to set those boundaries, even more difficult when those boundaries aren't respected. But people who respect you will respect your boundaries. Those who protest the loudest to your boundaries are the ones that benefited the most from when you didn't have any. So keep that in mind when you're setting those boundaries. When you get a lot of pushback from someone, a lot of gaslighting or manipulation or just making you feel really bad about it, those are the people that benefited the most from you not having any. And those are probably the ones that require the strongest boundaries.
Yeah. Huge red flag. So if you're having this wonderful relationship with mom and all of a sudden you're like, adult now, I need to start protecting sort of my intimacy with my spouse, my partner, and she protests, then that's something to look deeper into. So what would make mom do that? What would mom get from not having those boundaries? Like what are some things that maybe she's codependent upon?
It's attachment. A lot of it comes down to attachment, right? So as I said, like we as parents, we learn to let go little by little, as hard as it is, as our kids get older and go into adulthood. And if there's just not that enough support and mom helping going through that transition, right? Like some of that attachment still lingers there and there's fear. That's where a lot of control comes from, right? Ultimately, the root of control is fear, a fear of losing control, losing power, losing a connection, losing something. And so there's a fear of losing that connection, that closeness that mom doesn't want. Mom doesn't want to lose that. So having very porous boundaries keeps that connection alive, so to speak. It keeps it very comfortable for mom because she's always in the know of what's going on. So it might feel like a distancing, or it might feel like a disconnect on mom's end when those boundaries are set. And that's a difficult conversation because it doesn't have anything to do with affection or caring or any of those things. It's just, as an adult, I have to emotionally protect myself and my relationship by setting those boundaries. And, it should be respected.
Have you seen any severe cases of this?
Yes.
Can you give some examples of maybe some things that were happening that were not clearly working for the party that you were seeing, and how they chose to resolve it?
Yeah, so oftentimes I'll see like a triangulation that occurs, right? So triangulation is when you have the couple, which is two people, and then you have another third party. So sometimes that third party is like an in-law, so a mom or a dad, and they become overly involved in the relationship, so thus the triangle. So sometimes the kid, the adult kid of the mother, gets stuck in the middle. So mother-in-law wants to get involved, wants to have say, wants to be overly involved in the relationship. Let's say, for example, that's her son. And then the wife is pulling in the other direction to say, like, no, I don't appreciate that. I don't like how your mom just shows up. I don't like how your mom does this with our kids. I don't like how your mom talks to me, all of those things. And then son in the middle, who perhaps hasn't set very healthy boundaries with mom, is stuck. He's stuck in the middle between, I don't want to upset my mom and I don't want to upset my wife. And I've seen cases where it gets to a point where the wife is like, listen, I'm going to leave. I'm going to leave this relationship if you can't take my side, essentially. Like, I need you to have my back. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? And that gets really tricky when he doesn't want to upset his mom. He doesn't want to complicate his relationship with his mom. So he feels stuck. And it feels very like, well, what am I supposed to do? I'm stuck between a rock and a hard place. That is often a very, very heavy point of contention in relationships, where that person feels like they have to choose, like there's some sort of ultimatum happening, and ultimatums don't work.
Right.
They just, so instead of the ultimatum, setting boundaries and showing a united front, right? The couple has to be a united front. This is something that we have decided. This is something that we are going to do. This is something that we are comfortable with, and really creating that healthy boundary, that we-ness with your partner, helps establish those boundaries with the mother-in-law. But that son will still have some work to do on his own too. Like, listen, this is my wife. I have her back 100%. I'm on her side. I'm on her team. I love you. I value our relationship, but I do expect, a certain level of respect. I do expect you to respect her boundaries. I expect you to respect our boundaries. And setting those expectations, just laying them out there, is tricky. It's hard. It takes a long time. It takes a lot of guts.
Yeah. Well, and I can see how, so I'm a boy mom, and I just have the one boy, and, I've been married to two men in my lifetime. So I've had experience with that kind of dynamic also. And I feel like, and this is not obviously true for everybody, but I feel like guys are just so easygoing, and they just kind of let their mom do whatever. Well, okay, mom, whatever. If you want to come by, you want to clean my house, fine, cool. Like, and they're just easygoing. So they don't necessarily, in my experience, see that mom is doing any sort of overstepping, and gee, why is my wife getting so, getting her undies in a wad over this? Like, this is, you know what I mean? Like, this is, my mom's just trying to help. She's just helping. She's just bringing over dinner, or she's doing our dishes. Like, who cares? Let her do it, but on the other side, it's like, for the woman in the situation, I don't know. I've never been in a same-sex marriage, so I don't know if it's the same dynamic, but I assume so. People are people, right? So for the one in the situation who didn't sort of have that relationship with their mom, or that's not their mom, it's weird. It's weird for somebody to come in and just be like, okay, I'm here, I'm taking over, and then I don't feel like, again, in my experience, everybody's different, but I just don't feel like the guys really care. Just like, whatever. Have you seen that?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I think that a lot of that comes down to attachment, right? So the attachment relationship between the son and your example and his mom. And also there could be some conflict avoidance too. Like, I don't really want to rock the boat. I don't want to cause a conflict. So I'm just stick my head in the sand and pretend that nothing's happening until it's like in my face. And, you know, my wife is yelling at me and, you know, telling me that she's going to leave. And that's when you have to do something. Then it's like damage control, right? Then it does feel like an ultimatum. Then it feels like, well, I have to set these boundaries with mom, even though I don't really want to, but now I feel like I have to. And if that message translates to the mother-in-law, that is adversely going to affect the mother-in-law's relationship with the wife now, right? Because now she says, oh, okay, well, now you're trying to pit my son against me. You're trying to control him. You don't want me to be in his life. And it just creates it just blows up from there and just evolves from there. So that it is really common to see men want to avoid that sort of conflict because they don't want to be stuck in the middle. So they just avoid it altogether. Or there's also cases where he feels very attached to his mom and he's having a hard time with, you know, that particular growth and, you know, how those steps transpire, right? How that growth kind of takes place in his life.
You know, you tell me what you think about this, but here's my take. I feel like in a perfect world, the spouse, so not the son or daughter of the mom in question, so the other one, whether that be male or female, that's the one with the problem. They should be the one having the conversation with the other party. They should be initiating it. They should be putting their thoughts and feelings on the table. I feel like that's ideal. I feel like that probably rarely happens, though. Would you agree?
Yeah, it happens that way a lot because it comes from like pressure. Like that message typically comes from the pressure from, you know, the wife in this scenario to her husband. Like there's a lot of pressure for him to talk to his mom about it. So it's not really genuine. It's not really coming from him. And so later on down the line, there's a very high chance he's going to become resentful about that. He's going to become resentful about having to set those boundaries before he was ready or wanted to with his mom. But yeah, those messages do need to come from the child of whoever's mom that is, but making sure that they are still that united front with their partner so that they know they're sending that message that like, hey, I support my partner. This is how we feel about it kind of thing. But it should definitely be the child of whoever parent that is.
So you think from the child. So I didn't pose my question to you clearly because my thought is in a perfect world, it'd be the one having the problems. So let's just use my relationship, for example, and let's just say that I was having some boundary issues with my mother-in-law. Personally, I feel like, and let's discuss because you're the professional here. Personally, I feel like is my place to be like, hey, mama, let's have a talk so that I can share with you how I was raised, why I feel the way I feel. Like, not everybody's going to be in tune and in touch with their feelings and thoughts like that, though. But I kind of feel like in a perfect world, like that would be the ideal situation, right? But that almost rarely, that's a rare occasion, I think. I feel like it's more the child of the parent in question is having the conversation, you know, whether they be male or female, but it is having the conversation. And like you said, reluctantly. So when you're having this conversation you don't really want to have and you don't really believe, then I feel like that maybe even causes more conflict for the couple themselves.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, to your point, it is really important that we all advocate for ourselves, right? So if we see something that like our mother-in-law is doing or whatever that we don't like, it's really important to advocate for ourselves. Where I feel it's important that the child of that mom gets involved is that they have that conversation beforehand, or at least sometime in that general time vicinity, because we don't want to create that triangulation or encourage that triangulation. So if mom reaches out to son and says, your wife called me or talked to me and said, you know, blah, 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 blah. And he's like, oh, I don't know anything about that. Then it's like, oh, there's a crack, there's a crevice there that can be capitalized on. And mom might use that. Mom might use that to drive a wedge between the husband and the wife. So that's why if the child was told about it first, had that conversation first, and mom says, hey, your wife called me, told me blah, blah, blah. And he's like, oh, okay. Well, yeah, I know that she was going to talk to you about that. How'd you feel about it? And so it's like, yeah, I already know, but I left it to her to have that conversation because she's advocating for herself or for our kids or, whatever the case may be. But I do think it's important that they have knowledge of that. So again, they don't try to capitalize on that triangulation or try to find a way to drive a wedge between the couple.
That's a hard and scary conversation to have for somebody that's not their parent.
Very.
Like I'm putting myself in, I've been in that position. So I'm putting myself back there and I'm like, ooh, that's really hard. What suggestions do you have, if any, that would help somebody sort of organize their thoughts and present them to the other party in a way that is hopefully absorbed by the other party appropriately and doesn't cause more fire?
Yeah, absolutely. So same kind of approach that we ideally want to go to our partner with when we have any sort of complaint, problem, whatever. We want to keep it about our experience, about our feelings, and keeping the word you out of it as much as possible. Anytime you invite that word you into the room, it's like ding, 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 like we're ready to fight, right?
Yeah.
So try to cut down on the defensiveness as much as possible. So I really appreciate that your mom wants to come by and, fold the laundry or do whatever. But I would really appreciate if I had a couple hours heads up or 24 hours heads up or something like that. What do you think about that? And inviting his input in there too, so that if he does feel like, oh, I don't think that's a big deal, there's an opportunity to validate that, right? He may not feel like it's a big deal, but validating her and what her experience is really, really, really important. Just like in any sort of conflict resolution situation, that validation piece is really important. So having that conversation, keeping it about my experience is how I feel, is the best way to open that line of communication, to keep the defensiveness down and just sharing what your experience is.
So I don't know if you can answer this, but is it more normal to have conflict than not in your experience and with the people that you've spoken to and your, just your patients?
Conflict with in-laws?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
It's pretty normal. I mean,
yeah.
I feel like it is too, just with my experience and just, with my friend base and all of that. I feel like it's pretty normal. And, I sat down to think about it one day, really, truly, why can't, because I have a whole line of this right behind me. And I think it's ridiculous for us to think that two families that have been raised totally different, that have gone through totally different things, maybe lived in different areas of the country or the world and have different culture, can come together and it's all cherries and rainbows. Right? It's just so unrealistic.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's different parenting dynamics. There's different attachment dynamics. There's trauma. There's sibling dynamics. There's culture. There's religion. There's so many different layers of that. And then you add in the big one, which is gender. Yeah. In a heterosexual relationship, men and women are raised completely differently. Yeah. They can have the same parents, but it's 2022, but gender roles are still alive and well, unfortunately. So, there's a lot of key differences in how men and women are raised, and women are encouraged to, cry and show your emotions and, be vulnerable in those things, and tend to be seen as highly emotional creatures, right? And then men, on the other hand, not all the time, but a lot, when they're growing up as kids, it's like, don't be such a girl. Don't cry about it. I'm going to give you something to cry about. Don't be such a baby, all of those things. So encouraging him to stifle his emotional responses. And that grows into adulthood, because now I've learned it's not safe. It's not safe for me to be emotionally vulnerable. And then men and women get together in a relationship and they don't understand why we can't communicate and talk about our feelings. She's like, why don't you understand my feelings? Why can't you just listen to me and not try to fix it? And he's like, I don't know why you're making such a big deal out of this. I don't know why you're so emotional. And it's like, it all comes down to the specific gender roles and society expectations of men and women and how different they are. So that just adds on a whole layer on top of all the family differences.
So if you're out there feeling like, gosh, why can't I get along with my in-laws? Or why can't I, why aren't we on the same page kind of thing? You're so not alone. It is like just so common. And it's just all the things that, Diana just rattled off. It's all those reasons. It's all those factors. I feel so bad for, I know a lot of ladies. I don't necessarily know a lot of, I network with a lot of ladies. And so I happen to talk with a lot of ladies throughout the day. And, I feel so bad for those that really get down on themselves for thinking that it's only me. What's wrong with me? Why am I having this conflict? Susie Q over there has a great relationship with her mother-in-law. Why her, not me? That kind of thing. And, Susie Q over there may not be telling you her whole story, or she may very well have a great relationship with her mother-in-law. Totally can happen, right? Like, there was many years where personally my mother-in-law and I had some conflict, and it was for several factors that you mentioned. And, I've been with my husband now for almost 10 years. This is year 10. We're 2022, right? Yeah. This is year 10. And we're just now getting to the point, and it's a lovely, lovely relationship. We're just now getting to the point where we're buddies, like we're sisters. And it took a minute to get there. And I remember feeling like, why is this, like, why? And I remember kind of getting down on myself, but I just want to broadcast it to the world out there. It's a very normal thing.
Absolutely. And you're not crazy, and you're not overreacting, and you're not any of those things. That's all gaslighting type language, right? Like right. Way that people try to avoid those negative feelings, because oftentimes people are very uncomfortable with your negative feelings, especially if it's your partner. They just want it to go away. They just want the problem to go away. They want the negativity to stop. So I'm just going to either find a way to fix it, or just try to make it seem like you're crazy or you're overreacting or whatever. And you're not. Your feelings are 100% valid. They're real, and they deserve to be heard.
Totally agree. So that's mother-in-law problems. What about father-in-law problems? What are the typical things that you see? Is it more, and again, we're just looking at, I'm just asking Diana about her clients that she sees come through the door. Could be very, very different out there in the world. But, are you seeing it's more weighted? Mother-in-law tends to be the issue more, or are we seeing father-in-law kind of right up there with her?
I wouldn't say that the father-in-law dynamic there isn't present at all, but it's certainly not as common as difficulty and conflict with mother-in-law. I typically hear a lot of the father-in-law just kind of goes along with the flow, goes with the program, which fits perfectly in line with what you just said a few minutes ago. Is I feel like guys are just kind of
don't care,
right? Especially if they've been married for 30, 40 years. It's just like, well, all right, whatever
she wants.
Right, let's just go with the program here. So I can't think of a particular instance where the father-in-law was heavily involved in causing conflict within a couple, but I do know that it happens. And there are little things here and there, little comments that are made, typically when it's the father of the woman in the relationship and they're in a heterosexual relationship. Because he wants to make sure that her partner is good enough, right? Is able to support her, is there for her emotional needs, and, anything else that she could possibly need, setting a good example for their kids, and, being financially stable. And a lot of that does lean into, again, the society expectations, right? Like, what's a good provider? If you ask what makes a man a good provider, it's, he's able to financially provide. Right. But when you say, or ask the question, like, what makes a mom a good provider? Oh, well, she's very loving, and she's nurturing, and, she makes the lunches and the dinners and keeps the house really clean. And you see, there's so much difference with that too. So to kind of circle back to the father-in-law comment, he's trying to make sure that he's sometimes passing on that same expectation to his son-in-law, that he's a good provider, meaning that he can provide financially, but maybe not in some of those other areas. Does that happen all the time? No, but it is very common.
Seems to be common. And in my experience, and for, a lot of the conversations that I've had in my lifetime with other people, it seems to be the same. Like the mother-in-law is kind of more like of the household stuff, cleanliness of the household, raising kids, diapering, breastfeeding, all of that stuff. You know what I mean? And then dad's kind of like money and house, and kind of more those areas. Mm-hmm. Which, I mean, if you're, if you're one of those women, the roles are kind of different in my house, right? So I don't like handle the domestic stuff. My husband more handles the domestic stuff. So, but if you're a woman that handles the domestic stuff, that's your domain. Like that's your kingdom. And somebody's coming on in and they're changing all your rules. And, I can totally relate with how that just feels violating. And then they're older. And so then we have this dynamic of, I mean, I don't know how old you are or how old our listeners are, but I was raised that they're older than you respect your elders, and that's kind of what you do, like whatever they say goes kind of thing. Do I agree with that? No, but that's how I was raised. And so that's kind of always in the back of your head, right? I struggled with that. Do you have couples that struggle with that dynamic also?
Sure. The matriarch or the patriarch of the family is, the mother-in-law, the father-in-law. And so whatever they say kind of goes, we just go with the program. We go and see them for the holidays. That's kind of just like headquarters or like the nerve center of the family, right? So there is a lot of expectation to just blindly go along with or respect whatever the current system is, because that's how it's always been. So pushing back on that is difficult. And is it always necessary? Maybe not, but it is really important to send the message that respect is earned. It's not automatically given. We will go into any relationship with an open mind, open respect until it's violated, until there's a reason to believe otherwise. But teaching, especially our kids as they get older, that yes, respect your teachers, respect your parents, and respect all of those adults in your life, but also understand that you must be respected too. And so it's not a one-way street. So I think that's important more than ever to teach our kids that message too. So they learn that from us as well.
Yeah. And for me, that was a hard one just because of how I was raised. So it was a hard one for me to kind of I don't know if justify my feelings is the right word, but feel my feelings and feel like I was allowed to have them. Mm-hmm. That was really kind of tough for me. All these things that are instilled in you in childhood, man.
Yep, absolutely.
So that's mother-in-law, father-in-law in a nutshell there. Now, what about still we have our same couple. Let's just say they have been in past relationships, whatever, and they're bringing children together, from a previous relationship, and we're all coming together and we're Brady bunching it up. Can you speak a little bit to that dynamic, to bringing from the couple's perspective, like bringing children into it, and what sort of, obstacles does that then present for the couple?
Blending families. Blending families is exciting. There's so much more love to give with more people, but it also comes with a lot of conflict and complications too, right? We have to be very intentional with our choices going into a blended family situation. So one of the important things about blending the families when there's kids involved is the parent of the children, whichever side it may be, should be the one in charge of discipline of their own kids. Yeah. It shouldn't be the other parent, even if the other parent has the blessing of that original parent, especially in the beginning. That other parent probably shouldn't be providing discipline for the other kids. And you're trying to build a culture of trust and acceptance. And so just stepping in and potentially appearing like you're taking the place of the other parent that's no longer in the picture is not the move when you're going into a blended family. So it's important for the mom and the dad, or the two partners, to have that conversation about boundaries and parenting each other's kids, because they are going to have different parenting styles. And then you have the other parents that are no longer in the picture at their homes that have their own parenting styles. So then you get this cross conflict sometimes where you're contending with your spouse's ex, who has the kids half the time, and they have no rules and all the electronics and all those things. And then they come to your house and maybe there's stricter rules, or different rules to abide by, and then you have conflict with that, right? So setting boundaries around not only parenting the kids while they're in your house, but setting boundaries with the other parents that are no longer in the picture and creating a different sort of relationship if possible. That's not always possible, but when you can, for the benefit of the kids, setting those boundaries and expectations so that the kids have as much consistency as possible is definitely the way to go.
I will tell you that is really important, because that is really hard on the kids when it doesn't happen that way. So in my experience, it didn't happen that way. And, parent A gave new spouse or whatever, full authorization. Yeah, you make decisions, you discipline, all of that stuff. And as a child coming into that, ooh, do you have resentment for both of them? Both of them. Like, how dare you tell a stranger? Yeah, I don't care if you're in love with them. They're a stranger to me. Like, how dare you tell them that they now have all of this authority over me? That just feels so weird as a child. And I will tell you, parents out there right now, having come from divorced parents, and both of them having several spouses in the picture while I was growing up, the kids will not be fine. It is not okay. We are not resilient, and we need therapy. Shall I repeat that? Like, how many times do I hear from parents, Diana? Oh, they're fine. Kids are tough. Kids are resilient. No, they fucking aren't. Pardon my French, but no, they're not. And it will give them problems. It probably already is giving them problems. And you need to address that. And you need to not sweep that under the rug. And you need to get that child individual therapy. Stepping down from the soapbox. Can you tell I've had a little bit of experience with that?
Louder for those in the back.
Exactly. Shall I repeat myself for those that really need to hear it? It burns my ass that society thinks that kids are not people. That's how I felt I was treated as a child, not a person. Like, oh, just fine. Just go with that one. That one will now discipline you. Oh, it's 5 years later and we're not in that relationship anymore. Here's another one. No. And maybe that's not your experience out there, guys. Those of you that are thinking your kids are resilient, maybe they are, and maybe your kids are totally fine. But I will guarantee that they'll need therapy at some point along that way in order for them to be really confident and, in their skin as adults, and really behaving in healthy manners and winning situations for themselves. It's just so tough to go through that. The whole step parent thing was really difficult for me. And, being 43 years old now, I super appreciate some of those step parents that came into my life are still in my life. And they're actually more in my life than my real parents are, which is kind of a funny way, or funny sort of trajectory. But going back to what you just said, the importance of that is, I think, beyond what people give it credit for. Just coming from a child perspective. And so does the parent, now they're all in love and this person is the best thing since sliced bread and blah, blah, blah. Like, when does this conversation come into play? Do you suggest having this sort of right up front, like date 1, date 2? Like, hey, if this goes any further, well, maybe not date 1 or 2, but 3. Like, if this goes any further, hey, I have Johnny and Susie at home. This is how it's going to roll. Or this is how I see it. I guess we can't just tell people this is how it's going to roll, but this is how I would like to see it roll. How do you feel about that? Because I feel like some people would give you pushback and say, no, if they're coming into my house or if they're coming into our home together, it's under my roof, like my rules kind of thing. You know what I mean? I just went off on a huge tangent and there was a lot there. I'm sorry.
No, when you go about it that way, it teaches your kids that really their feelings aren't valuable. They don't really matter. And that can set them up for, emotional stuff later. I do want to say that, as a disclaimer, there are plenty of moms on here that have gotten into new marriages and have like a step parent involved now. And I'm sure that the majority of you guys are just crushing it. Like, if you're being intentional about how the step parent is introduced, how you guys choose to discipline, how you parent, making sure that those are divided roles in your family. If you haven't already, I highly recommend going to family counseling so that you guys can really sort out some of those parenting things. It's really only going to benefit you guys, and it's going to benefit your kids in the long run, I promise. That being said, to answer your question, certainly before moving in together, those types of conversations should definitely be completely hammered out, no questions. In terms of, introducing, your new partner to your kids, I feel like it's pretty subjective. I think everyone has a certain timeline in mind of how long they want to do that, but keeping them as uninvolved in your kid's life for a fairly extended period amount of time is probably the best way to go, because there just needs to be an adequate amount of time to make sure that your relationship is healthy, that you're bringing a really good dynamic into your existing family, that you guys are on the same page in terms of parenting, and being able to observe, how your partner feels about setting some of those expectations and those boundaries before you bring them into the house. And then now we're having conflicts, and then there's even more adjustment because maybe this isn't going to work after all. Yeah. So those conversations certainly have to happen way before moving in together.
I feel like the child needs an adjustment period too. So like maybe you've been dating and cool kid doesn't know anything about it. And then all of a sudden you're like, okay, let's move in together. And boom, that's when right? Like the kid needs to let me warm up to you. Let me get to know you. Let me establish my own relationship with you. Let me like you first before you come into my private space,
Yes.
Are there any suggestions for that sort of interim period, like that? Any sort of conversations or activities that you would suggest parent A has with their own children, bringing step parent into it?
Yeah, absolutely. Making sure the kid has a choice, has options, right? Like, so, depending on the age of your kids, right, depends on how much you can share. I'm seeing someone, or I have a friend, or whatever, your verbiage is that makes you feel most comfortable. But allowing them to choose when and where that type of introduction takes place, and not just springing it on them. But different options could be like, hey, is it okay if I bring them to, your football game on Saturday? Or is it okay that they come to the swim meet, or, those types of things? Or, hey, and we're going to go out to dinner or go have coffee or something like that. Just a neutral ground somewhere that's not in the house. Oh, he's going to come over and meet you. Like, go somewhere neutral ground, a restaurant, like I said, a game, something like that, where they can just kind of feel them out, but then they also have an exit, because we don't want the child to feel uncomfortable in their own home where they have to retreat back to their room or go somewhere else to feel safe, to feel secure. So definitely doing some sort of introduction and future activities on neutral ground where the kid has a choice. Do you want to do it Friday? Do you want to do it Saturday? Do you want to do lunch, or do you want to do dinner? Or kind of allowing them to have some sort of choice so they feel like they have a teensy bit of control over the situation, because that's going to make them feel more in control and safer to show whatever their emotions are.
Yeah. I like that. That feels a lot more comfortable to me. So let's flip it. So step parent's perspective, what should step parent be doing? What is the best approach in a healthy manner for a step parent to have?
So every step parent dynamic is different, and everyone feels differently about coming into a family, especially if they have kids of their own or they don't have kids of their own. That definitely makes a huge difference, right? Like, I don't have any experience with kids, and now I'm involved with somebody who has 2 kids. Like, this is a huge adjustment. I don't know anything about what it's like to have kids. You know what I mean? So that certainly begs the conversation of like, what's your routine like? What do you want me to do? What is my role when I come into the house? That being said, too, I kind of liken becoming a step parent to a new manager in retail. Like, I worked in retail for 17 years. And I took over a lot of stores. And when you're a manager, you step in, and instead of just going, okay, so we're going to do it this way, and we're going to change this, and we're going to hire this person, and don't do that, because that's going to alienate everybody that's there, right? Nobody's going to like you. But if you come in and you observe, you kind of see how everything works. You observe the system, you see who does what, who responds to what everyone's strengths are, like that type of thing. Very similar to being a new step parent coming into this new system, this new environment, is spending a lot of time observing and allowing them to come to you with questions, comments, connection, whatever the case may be. That doesn't mean go hole yourself up on the couch and wait for them to come talk to you, but spend a lot of time observing, just looking around, checking out the system, asking a lot of questions. What do you normally do after school? What's your favorite snack to have when you get home from school? How was dance today? When do you go to dance? Like a lot of things just having to do with them, showing a lot of interest. You also get to learn a lot about not only their routine, but how comfortable they are sharing that information with you and seeing where they will allow you to come in. Asking those same sorts of questions. Like, I would love to see your dance practice one day. Like, would that be okay with you if I came sometime? Like, let me know when you're okay with that. And again, giving them that choice to do that. So you're showing that interest, you're observing, you're watching, but you're not forcing yourself. I see a lot of times where the step parent feels like, well, I'm here now, I'm the step parent, so I'm just going to come in and guns blazing, so to speak, and just involve myself in everything. And that's certainly not going to make the kids feel incredibly emotionally safe. And it's ultimately going to cause some resentment, not only with the kids, but it's going to cause conflict with your partner too, because they're going to see how their kids are reacting. They're not going to be super pleased about that. And it's just going to cause more conflict.
Totally agree. Do you suggest that the step parent bring gifts or like try and warm up to the child in that way? Or do you think that's just a bomb?
I would say the majority of the time, I would probably skip the gift, only because depending on the age of the kids, like if they're really young, they're going to assume that's what you're here to do. Like, you're here to bring me a present. Like, oh, you're here, you bring me a present.
Right.
That's what younger kids are going to think. A little bit older kids, tweens, teenagers are going to think, oh, so you're just trying to buy my affection then. You're just trying to buy me. Well, I can't be bought. I have to be, valued and seen and all of those things, even though they don't use that particular vernacular. Right. So using the gifts, I think, is probably not the best approach if you're really just trying to make that genuine, long-lasting connection with them.
Makes a lot of sense. Any other suggestions for the step parent or any observations that maybe you've, discovered throughout your practice that you feel would be an important sort of nugget to drop here?
Absolutely. The parent of the kids, if you're a step parent coming in, whether you have your own kids or not, having that conversation with your partner about what your role is and ideally what they want your role to be, and making sure that you're comfortable with whatever those expectations are. Because they might say, I don't know, just like, you see them jumping on the couch, tell them to stop jumping on the couch, but making it really clear that I need to know what my role is here, what you want me to be doing, and am I comfortable doing that? Let's talk about timelines. Let's talk about, activities. Which ones should I insert myself into? Which one should I ask to be attending? Is there maybe a special activity that just you and your daughter do that I need to know is off limits? If it's you guys go get Starbucks every Saturday at 10 o'clock or whatever, like, I need to know what special rituals, traditions that you guys have, because I want to be very cognizant of that and I want to be supportive of that. So if your job is to read the bedtime story every night before bed, or you have some sort of special ritual, like, I want to know about that so that not only I can be aware of it, but I can support it too and really encourage it. So getting to know their routine, and having that conversation about what my role is here, what expectations do you have of me, and what do you not want to see happen, so that we're all on the same page, so that I can avoid anything that might make you or your kids feel uncomfortable.
I love that. Give kids a voice, man. Like, they're people, they have feelings, they have thoughts, let them speak them. And, I'm trying to vocalize this appropriately. And I feel like as a child, I just wasn't treated that way. And, I'm sure a lot of people can relate with what I'm saying, and I'm sure a lot can't, and they don't have that particular experience. But kids really do have thoughts and feelings, and it's really important to give them, attention, because they grow up into adults that then have what does that cause when you're, as an adult, when you're not heard, listened to as a child, and your opinion doesn't matter, and you're just thrown wherever and, expected to be resilient and, bounce back. Like, what does that cause for now the adult child?
A lot of times that is like attachment disorders. So like anxious attachment is, a form of relationship attachment where we feel like we need to make sure our position in our relationship is secure. Like someone that's like, are you mad at me? Is everything okay? Are you mad at me? Like, did I make you mad? Is there something I can do? Very anxious, very people pleasing type of behavior because we're not really sure about our position in the relationship. So that can sometimes cause anxious attachment. And if we are gravitating in a relationship towards someone that has the same sort of attachment type or something that's not particularly secure, that can also cause conflict all by itself. But typically people pleasing behavior or walking on eggshells, those are all results of anxious attachment or not being heard, having your feelings valued, being minimized, being dismissed, all those types of things.
Yeah, not good stuff.
No, not at all.
Anything else you'd like to add about this topic today?
No, I don't think so. I think we covered a lot of good stuff today. But definitely, if anyone out there has any questions or wants further clarification on anything, please leave a comment on here. I'd be more than happy to respond.
Absolutely. And if anybody would like to chat with Diana, your door is always open, I assume, and you offer consultations. Talk to me a little bit about that.
I do. I offer free 15-minute consultations on my website. So it's dianaeiseltherapy.com. Just click on schedule a consult, pick your time. We have 15 minutes dedicated towards whatever questions you have. And then other than that, if you want to set up an appointment, then we can go from there.
Awesome. And I also have your Facebook page in the show notes. So that's an easy click. If you want to get in touch with Diana, thank you again. We will see you next month.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.